Hello, and welcome back to the Alexander Society podcast. We're back with another mystery docket. I'm Tim, your host, here to bash a rapist over the head with a metal rebar.
Oh,
Along for the journey like a scared bunny in their second gunfight with law enforcement is my co-host, Derek. How are you, Derek?
oh fuck, oh fuck.
That's a thing that fucking happened. A bunny got into two gunfights and fucking lived.
No. I'm thinking of the take it. What was that? You beat in the skull of a.
Rapist, yeah.
Oh my god, that is a hell of a way to start an episode, my guy. Holy shit.
Yep.
Oh, I'm so hyped for this episode.
You didn't know that happened?
No, I don't know anything about Bonnie and Clyde besides like the shootout in. I don't even know where in Texas it was. I just know it ended in Texas.
Wasn't in Texas.
It wasn't? Oh shit.
It was in Louisiana.
Oh yeah, it was Louisiana. Why do you think it was? They spent a lot of time in Texas, though, right?
There's a reason why it was Louisiana, because I thought it was Oklahoma at first, because it is in what's that A town right next to Edmond?
The what? Arcadia?
Arcadia. It was in Arcadia, Louisiana, and I thought they were talking about Oklahoma at first. I was like, I would have heard if it was in Oklahoma, wouldn't I have? Because we were right in that area. But no, it was Arcadia, Louisiana.
Yeah, but by the way, Arcadia is best known for two things around where I grew up. It's known for Pops, which is the only reason anybody goes there, and it's known for cops, which is which is the only thing that people experience of the town as they're driving through, because boy, they're militant about speeding laws. So yeah, Arcadia, best known for Pops and cops.
So how have you been, Derek?
I've been all right. It was a fucking dumb week. It was work has been weird because we've been one of my coworkers was fired, and so the last two of us have just had a whole bunch of extra work to do. And I was also sick like last weekend.
Yeah, you was telling me and our guest editor Matt about that.
Yeah, I had a I don't even know what it was. It felt like strep throat, but instead of in my throat, it was in my sinuses.
Probably a sinus infection.
Maybe, yeah, that makes sense actually. I don't know.
Do you know how many of those? I got at least two of those from Inio's dorms.
Yeah, either sinus infection or black mold from those fucking dorms.
Yep.
Yeah, but this today was pretty great. I went and hung out with my cousin. We went to lunch. I enjoyed today. Tim, what have you been up to? What have you been? I mean, you told me already, but go ahead.
Life has been crazy. First, I would like to apologize for our audience for that 2-week delay on our Black History Month episode. And little housekeeping notes: we will not be releasing the episodes in the order they were recorded in. Our next episode, which you'll have already heard, is going to be
San Patricio's.
San Patricio's episode, which was the recording before this. Then we're going to release this episode, and then I'm going to release the Theranos episode. So you get to know a topic ahead of time, audience. We're going to release an episode on Theranos. So it's going to be 2 Alexander articles, 2 mystery dockets, and then we're going to go back to our schedule of back and forth.
God, those were all such good episodes too.
They are. We're going to get some bangers in.
Oh, we are on a fucking roll.
I dropped the ball with the Malcolm X episode, but I think this is going to be good either way. Life got in the way, though, on multiple fronts. I had some personal life stuff, and then my car died, and I was dealing with all that stress, and I just could not get the editing done.
Yeah, the Malcolm X. Matt's a saint, by the way. Matt, our guest editor. He is a fucking saint.
He is the real MVP.
And that episode actually came out sounding really good.
Especially with how many artifacts we found in the recording, to be honest.
Yeah, despite the length of the recording and the fact that, or the length of what we had recorded. And
yeah, we had 5.25 hour, 5.5 hour recording on that.
Yeah, and despite the fact that it was a topic I was very nervous to do, in all honesty, because I really want...
I think it turned out great. I do.
Yeah, it turned out great despite the circumstances, so I'm happy with it.
So, Derek, after all this rigmarole, what are you drinking tonight?
What am I drinking tonight? So, I dove into the very tiny itty bitty little bit of knowledge that I had on this topic and tried and just kind of wandered around the liquor store looking to theme it moderately appropriately. And for some godforsaken reason, I thought that Bonnie and Clyde had died in Texas, and so I got a Texas themed shooter. It is Deep Eddy Sweet Tea Vodka from Austin, Texas, 35% APV, which smells fantastic. I have not found I haven't found a sweet tea flavored liquor that I've liked so far, but this one is actually brewed with tea and it's not just an artificial flavoring. So I'm hoping it came out a little better. And then for my sips, going back to my absolute favorite microbrew, Oklahoma City Angry Scotsman. I'm gonna go with Fortitude, which is a Belgian style ale, a triple, and it is 9.8% alcohol by volume, which I'm so hyped for.
I'm so worried for you.
I love high volume beers. It's so good. And I just had a little sip, and fantastic, fantastic. It's a dry beer. It's a little light on the lighter side, but it's not like crazy. It's not a light beer by any means, but it is a little bit on the lighter side. Very smooth, very subdued flavor. Has a really nice a nice soft bitterness to it. It's very, very drinkable. I really enjoy it. And I'm gonna Tim, what are you drinking?
So I finally came back to my favorite brewery in Oklahoma as well, Prairie Ales. I got Patches. It's a sour ale with sour gummy candy, a 5.5. Honestly, it kind of just tastes like a seltzer. And then my initial plan to theme with the episode was to get some moonshine, but none of the liquor stores I ran to had moonshine. So I just copped out and I went got me some Svedka cherry limeade because I hadn't had vodka on the show in a little bit, and I know I like Svedka, and I'm going to go with brands I trust on vodka if I'm not trying to be cheeky about it.
Svedka is acceptable. It is the acceptable basic bitch drink.
I know it's a vodka answer, but it's
No. It is a bitch vodka. It is an acceptable bitch vodka because it may be cheap, but it is actually decent.
yeah, like that's what I thought. A little quick run past you because you didn't actually tell me if you wanted to follow this or not. How do you feel about this week? We don't really do rules on Mystery Docket, or when we do, we're way too drunk. But I want to throw in fun facts, and you get to decide if they're a shot or if they're a sip.
Yeah. Let's go with that. Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great.
You're just gonna judge them on how you feel like they would go on if they're not good or not, like whether they're a shot or they're a drink sip. So let's go ahead and start us off with our shot of the night.
Prost. You know, I think I found it. I think I found the good sweet tea liquor. This one's actually good for. I could actually see myself like pouring a glass of this and just sipping it casually.
Hell yeah. So before we really get into our main characters of the night, I'm gonna come out and say it. We're covering Bonnie and Clyde, and everyone throughout their family has the boogeyman family member that they use, whether they're actually related to or not. Like, hey, this criminal, you're related to them. Don't be like them. For my family, that was Bonnie and Clyde. My dad got told growing up that we were related to them. It's almost certainly that we're not. There's no empirical. They didn't do the research to find out if they were. Even if we were, it's so far off that we're like, it's not even worth counting, you know. But before we really get into Bonnie and Clyde, I asked Derek to do a little research for me for this episode to kind of set the scene, because this period, the Great Depression, essentially, as well as Prohibition, really was a different era mentality wise, and I kind of wanted Derek to give us a little background and just kind of set the scene for us.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things going on here. We kind of touched on them in like our episode on Smedley Butler. That was a pretty big part of his story. But the first big thing is obviously the Great Depression. So in 1929, there was a big run on the banks. Over a course of 3 or 4 days, the value of the Dow Jones fell by, I think, something like almost 45%, something like that, in a matter of like 3 or 4 days.
That's correct. Isn't that Black? Is it Black Thursday or what it was? Where everyone,
Yeah, it started on Black Thursday. Yeah,
and that's when the bunch of corporate bankers and lawyers just instead of face their losses decided to walk out the window.
yeah. So there was this enormous crash. Million, I think, some crazy number like $2.5 billion in investment was just disappeared into thin air overnight. It caused everybody in the country to just go and run on the banks and try to withdraw their cash, and the banks ended up losing all of their reserves and ended up defaulting. And so 25% of all of the banks in the country within the first year failed. They literally ran out of reserves and could not like cash out to their customers anymore.
Which we actually almost had last year. We had a run on a couple banks that essentially failed last year.
Yeah, it still happens on occasion. It's exceedingly rare for it to happen nowadays because of all the extra regulations we have and stuff. But hey, who cares?
You're essentially guaranteed not to lose your money that was stored, not invested, because the investments are never guaranteed, up to $250,000 in a bank account as long as it's insured by FDIC.
Nowadays, you'll never be ruined by it. But back then, that money just evaporated into thin air. The banks closed up their doors, and people's entire life savings ceased to exist. Businesses started to fail because they didn't have any money to run anything. That caused massive layoffs, which eventually caused a 23% unemployment rate, which is the highest we have ever had in the country before or since. Um, to give you an idea of just how bad this was in like economic terms, during the 2008 recession, the global GDP dropped by about 1% in 2008. By 1931, the global GDP had dropped by 15%. Yeah. People were just walking out of windows. Within a year, people were starving in the streets because they couldn't find jobs. Everything became more expensive. Everything just sucked for about a decade, and it really didn't like. It started to get better um, after FDR was elected and some of the New Deal stuff, but he just like the New Deal just didn't really do enough to like kickstart the economy. And it wasn't until the start of World War II that we started having this massive federal spending on military armament. But even then, like in 1940, in like when the first buildup of like the war economy was just starting, we were still hovering at about 15% unemployment. Of course, once we get into the war in 1941, that pretty quickly disappears because all those people who are out of jobs, they just go and join the army or they go into all of the factories that are desperately needing workers. And that helps fix it, but that it just for a decade in this country's history, one out of every four people just didn't have a job. And and then that was all exacerbated by a couple big things. The first thing was, of course, America's awful agricultural practices, which included things like mass monocropping, which destroyed the integrity of the soil in a lot of like very dusty, dry areas of the country. Which then in
Uh, and then because the lead out of the first war also made they were overproducing because of that war and they weren't ready for people across the pond in Europe to no longer need our products like our cotton and all that, and that also didn't help. It tanked prices, and that's kind of what part led to the impover like that was the major factor that led to the Barrows, which is Clyde's family being in the situation they ended up being in that led him down this path.
Yeah, so another thing that exacerbated the whole agricultural, I think the statistic was that despite massive, like of all of the spending that the federal government did to recover from the Great Depression, a a huge percentage of it went into agriculture. And despite the enormous federal spending for like farmer relief, about 10% of all farms in the country ended up, especially in the Great Plains, ended about 10% ended up trading hands one way or another, which is massive. Because at that time, farms were like generational family holdings.
Yeah, so the Barrows didn't really own a farm. They did the land rent where like they had to pay a portion of their crops to pay for their rent and then sell the rest. And when times were tough, they would help out on nearby farms to earn extra income. The things got that bad, they were just barely above, like they weren't really even above water with their farming operation before all this happened and this happened. And then I think there was a huge boll weevil or whatever the infestation was around this time as well, right there at the end of their farming career.
Yeah, as if everything else wasn't bad enough, they have a fucking locust plague, like a fucking Old Testament.
Yeah, it was just everything bad all at once for farmers at the time.
Yeah, and it's maybe something we can learn from today. The intersection of like ecological devastation and economic downturns maybe is something to learn from. There's one more factor that I really have to talk about because I thought it was so. The Great Depression in like economics academia is the most contentious and disagreed upon topic possibly in all of academics. There has never been a consensus on like the actual causes of the Great Depression, but the one thing that every economist can agree on in regards to the Great Depression was that there was one thing that really put it over the edge from being just a bad recession to being the worst recession in human history, and that was the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which was passed in 1931 as an attempt to it was a protectionist sort of policy. It was an attempt to raise they basically doubled all tariffs on imports in order to kind of discourage import into the U.S. economy and encourage more export so that American goods would raise in value. The actual effect that it had was that the entire global like trade by monetary value decreased by 50% in a single year, across the entire planet, and the resulting knock-on effects caused the Great Depression to reach Europe. That's what caused the Great Depression to reach into Europe, was because they were suddenly cut off from American goods, and the price of everything in their home country started to go up suddenly. And that inevitably led to the enormous economic recession that you see in Germany, which resulted in the mass inflation, which indirectly was one of the causes that resulted in the rise of the Nazis.
It's insane how interconnected historical events like that are, because you can draw direct ties to certain events. You're like, who knew this simple little like tax would fuck everything up?
Yeah, and the most important exports from the United States were agricultural goods, including cotton, wheat, and tobacco, which were the hardest affected industries in the United States during the Great Depression.
That's kind of the scene we're getting into. I'm also going to kind of set the scene. So Dallas was in its area of growth around this time as well when our story is setting out. They actually were pushing to grow. They put together a committee called the 150,000 Committee, where they wanted to grow Dallas to 150,000 people. And by a certain year, I can't remember the exact year, but they fell short, but and made it to 100, but didn't make it to 150.
That's impressive, though.
It is. But as all this economic downturn happened, they realized they were still growing, but they weren't growing with the people they wanted, because all of the people who couldn't afford to live in the country anymore needed to be within the city limits, find some other work, and they were undesirable at the time. So this led to the creation of what it was called, I don't know if it's still called that now, West Dallas, which is basically their slum area. It was essentially just a big, not even tent city, because most people did not have tents. It was like just a bunch of ramshackle American aid help. Like it was a refugee area essentially. Like they could not live in their old place. They just came piling into Dallas, and they were segregated off to West Dallas.
Yeah, and about what year was this? Was this like late, like 1890s?
I don't know the time period. it would not have been that late. I could be narrowing some of the background into the beginning of the story, though, because, like, I'm not great at discerning those things, especially when I'm listening to a book. Let me look that up real quick. From what I understand, this was at the beginning of Clyde's life. Not the beginning, like early teens, like 12 years old is when they moved to West Dallas. So let me do the math real quick. It would have been 19 teens. It would be the 1910s, like mid-ish.
Yeah, so right around World War One.
13, 14, I want to say it would have been. No, it would have been 1911 when he moved to West Dallas. Getting on into Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born October 1st, 2010. I mean, 1910, sorry. Yeah, he was dating future embryos and running around killing people with it. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born October 1st, 1910. She's the second of 3 children. And growing up, she wanted to be a poet or a writer, or she didn't really have a set throughout her life where, like, she wanted to be this one thing. Her real goal was famous. I want to be known throughout the world.
Yeah, the early 20th century really was the golden age for failed artists becoming like giant criminals, aren't they?
Potentially, yes. She was her father's favorite, although he did pass young. I don't remember what year, but it was early in her life when her father passed. Her father just couldn't seem to punish her. I don't remember what the book said, but when one of her uncles, so I don't know if it was her father's brother or her mother's brother, came along and visited sometimes, he would teach Bonnie cuss words, and she would string them all together and just piss her father off, but he couldn't punish her.
I'm just imagining like a little 8-year-old girl just doing the Dan Carlin bit about all the words you can't say on TV. Wretched, dirty old twat, 69 assholes, time in a knot.
Yeah, I swear, once Elena's old enough and I'm not going to get my ass put in the hospital, I'm teaching my niece that. I am. And I'm going to record it, and I'm going to send it to you, and then you're going to have to protect me or at least help me get to the hospital afterwards. I'm sorry, Zero, but it's going to happen. I will not regret it. There was a time where she was supposed to go up at church and sing with the choir, but instead of singing the hymn that she was supposed to, I can't remember the song. She busted out and singing a song that was like popular mainstream music, not religious, not appropriate for church whatsoever.
Yeah, the Dan Carlin song.
Essentially, yes. That was her thing.
I'm just imagining this little girl walking up in the middle of church, and while the choir is singing, she just starts belting out in WA.
No, just imagine she goes up there, modern equivalent at Sunday school, busts out an Eminem, just like Godzilla or fucking Rap God. I'd fucking die.
Without me.
She was married at 16. She dropped out of high school. And this isn't really where you really judge people to drop out of high school. Most people at the time, you went to school really to learn to read and write, and that if you weren't wealthy, you weren't doing. That's all you needed from school, because you weren't going to get a whole lot of benefit out of the extra schooling, essentially.
Yeah. Learn how to read a contract and sign your own name, and you're probably set for life during that time.
Yeah. And she married Ray Thornton after dropping out of high school. She dropped out to marry him. He also ended up being a criminal. And their marriage did not last long. It lasted year and a half or so.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I didn't know. I would never expect that. Someone who drops out at 16 to get married ends up divorced a year later? This never happened.
They didn't divorce. Till the day she died, she was still married to him.
Okay, that's even more on point.
You screwed up my fun fact for that. It was going to be a low-level one, but it was going to be a fun fact. He left her 3 times, each time with growing like lengths. And what it was is he was going on the road slash getting caught by law enforcement because he was a criminal. They didn't really get into his crimes, but he 2-bit thief or like just like, the thing about this time that we didn't really set up is a lot more people had relied on thievery to get by than today. Like it was more prevalent and more common just to you were a criminal to do your like it was almost part of your profession. Like this era, I want to say cements the whole current idea we have of the I am a professional thief in movies or media that we have now, where like this is kind of where it sparks and comes like originates from because it was a thing back then. Like that's kind of what with the way life dealt its hands. That's kind of what Clyde was forced to do.
Yeah, that's kind of an old concept too, though. Like
I meant our modern version of it. I didn't mean it started here. I just like the version we see in media today. This is where it's like kind of starts. This is where we can first see the real ties of it. Is what I'm saying.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I was just thinking like it's always for as long as civilization has been a thing. There's always been like a class of people who make their living finding the nooks and crannies of civilization and the legal system in order to make their living with crime. That's just something that's old as time. We still have it today in a lot of ways. It's just it's something humans do in civilization, basically.
So he left her 3 times, and each time the length increasing. Not only was he off committing crimes, but she suspected. I don't know if it ever like fully outright said that he was cheating, but like,
I can tell you right now, he was cheating.
well, they mentioned a specific woman in the book that I can't remember her name because she was a side character. I couldn't. She was mentioned like 30 seconds at most in the book. She eventually, after he was gone for a year and came back, she's like, "No, fuck you. I'm done with you," and left him. She didn't divorce him. Like I was gonna say, fun fact, because she could not quote unquote do that to him, which seemed to be a thing back then. They would leave bad spouses, but divorce seemed a step too far at the time, is what I've seen.
Oh yeah, I don't want him in my life, but I can't besmirch his honor by divorcing him.
During that last year where her husband wasn't there, he wasn't providing, she had to go out and like fend for herself, had to get a job, and she started working at a diner. And at this diner, she did that. She was worked at 2 diners. One diner was short, kind of like a more lower tier like place, not like real high spending clientele. And then there was another one where she actually got to like a pretty nice restaurant, like diner. It was still a diner, so it wasn't like she was serving at like a high fancy restaurant, but it was a lot better clientele. It's during this time, historians aren't 100% whether, as they say, she was turning tricks at the time, which means prostituting herself out or not, but they think that if she was doing better about it because of the switch to a nicer diner. Better paying clientele, essentially, like nicer quality selection.
Okay, yeah. So, for the time, that sounds like a decent, like, considering like, so she was born in 1910, she would have been like in her 20s. Yeah, so this would have been like middle of the Great Depression, like that.
Yeah, she was like this. She dies at I want to say 23. Yeah, she's like 17, 18 at this time. This is one I suspect you're going to say is going to be a shot fun fact, so I'm going to have it ready. Fun fact, one of her regulars at the diner was a postal worker named Tim. No, sorry, let me start that over. One of her regular customers was a postal worker named Ted Hinton. His name, I was like getting real dyslexia where like for some reason I was trying to say Tin, not Tim. All that. In 1930, in 1932, he joins the Dallas County Sheriff's Department and eventually becomes a member of the posse that gunned down Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh no!
So one of her regular diner customers, who at the time when he knew her was a postal worker, serves as part of the posse that shoots and guns her down, along with Clyde.
Oh, man.
That is one of the most interesting. That was not anywhere. Like, I didn't know that until I was like looking through, doing a little bit extra research. I think he knew. I think like they were all well aware of who Bonnie and Clyde were. It wasn't a surprise.
Okay, then it's like, okay, I'm going to kill this bitch who used to serve me pancakes.
Maybe she turned one too many tricks on him. So what is that, Derek?
Flapped one too many jacks on him. That's a shot.
That's what I thought. Cheers.
Prost. You forgot the chocolate chips in my pancakes one too many times.
I told you I need 36 chocolate chips, not 12.
I demanded 3 sugars in this coffee. Your ass is grass.
Another noteworthy slash potential, not really a fun fact, but kind of sad fun fact. It was likely that Bonnie was sterile due to a botched gynecological procedure.
Oh, no.
They don't really go, it was mentioned multiple times throughout the book, but it wasn't really mentioned what the story behind that was. Only that, okay, she was probably sterile. It was probably because of bad gynecology visit.
Ooh, I think I'm fine not knowing the details of that one, actually.
Same. It's just weird that they didn't tell us details with how often it. I'm assuming since you're sipping, it was a sip.
Oh, yeah.
Getting into Clyde. Clyde Chestnut. So he has 2 middle names, not literally, but he gave himself a new middle name at some point along the way. His Chestnut's his legal middle name, but he gave himself the middle name Champion Barrow instead. For the audience at home, Derek is quiet giggling, laughing to himself, losing his shit.
His middle name is Chestnut.
Yes. I thought you were laughing at the champion part, but the chestnut?
No, that's just the icing on the cake. That's his middle name is Chestnut, and to make up for that deficiency, he gave himself the nickname middle name Champion. Oh no, dude. Oh my god, I'm getting an idea. You know who this is? You know who this is the if these two were alive today, this would be the couple in like a small town who have never been more than like an hour's drive outside of their hometown where they were born.
You mean that one insult I hit you with on the military contract?
Almost, except same thing, except these two are like the biggest meth heads in town and are constantly fucking around with other people's property and getting into legal trouble because of it. That's who these people would be today, because that's the shit that they do. They give themselves like nicknames they think they sound badass. Like this guy, when he's getting arrested, they're gonna go through his pockets and they're gonna find like 5 pocket knives that he got from the locked display case at a 7-Eleven. Like this man owns a samurai sword.
I mean, he was obsessed with the Browning automatic rifle.
BARs. Okay. All right, that explains another so I grew up near Oklahoma City. And in Oklahoma City we had the I think it's still there. It's the Oklahoma Science Museum. It used to be called the Omniplex. And when I was a kid, one of the displays that they had was actually a modified Browning automatic rifle that I can't remember if it was owned by Bonnie and Clyde or if it was used in the shootout by the police against Bonnie and Clyde.
I think it could have been either way. Once we get to their deaths, there's actually a lot of shit I wasn't okay with that happened.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm not talking about the physical act of their deaths, although I do disagree, but I understand why it happened that way. I'm talking about the aftermath of the handling of the bodies and all that.
It was a police-involved shooting. There's absolutely going to be some misconduct involved.
Honestly, I don't even blame the officers who did it at the time. Like, I don't mean, like, do I think the shooting should have gone the way it did? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about afterwards, it became a spectacle. And not because the officers advertised it. People rushed. People tried. Well, let me stop there because we need to save it for later. But like it was.
Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
Clyde Chestnut Champion Barrow was born March 24th, 1909, and he was the fifth of 7 children. There was a lot of children. There's a lot of story behind them. I'm not really going to mention any of their siblings, other than his older brother Buck. His older brother Buck becomes a member of the Barrow Gang later on, so he'll come up. So that's why I'm mentioning him. He originally grew up in a rural area in Dallas. I'm not Dallas, but Texas. But due to the economic downturn, he ended up moving to West Dallas at 12 years old. He grew up poor, but he actually had a very strong work ethic. There was a strait where after he had dropped out of high school and he was trying to do things the proper way, that he moved from job to job, but like he was getting better jobs each time and he was getting that. But he hit the wall. It was you're one of them have-nots. You're not gonna get higher than this. You've hit your limit. They didn't want him to succeed, essentially.
Yeah, I can't tell you what I've got planning because the haters are gonna try to sabotage me.
And I honestly think if that hadn't been a barrier to Clyde, I think he could have been a very successful in just normal work. I don't think if they don't pull classism, I think Clyde doesn't become the man he was.
It's crazy that social stratification leads poor people to a life of crime. That I never could have seen that coming. That's never happened.
You ready for your next fun fact?
Oh boy, hit me with it.
Clyde was likely also sterile. Do you want to know? You want to guess why?
Shot in the dark, he was kicked in the nuts by a mule as a kid.
That would have been kind of funny compared to what he had. He, at a younger age, I don't remember the age they said, but I think it was before they moved to West Dallas, contracted a mysterious illness along with several members of his family, because it was a huge family. It was like, I think it was the father, I think it was him and another sibling. Contracted what they believe was yellow fever, and it had affected him, leaving him assumedly sterile. Both Bonnie and Clyde are presumed sterile, but there was never ever I guess, yeah, they definitely were sterile,
Can you imagine if God had played like the greatest prank of all time and put 2 people who are sterile with each other and thinking that they're never going to have kids, they just fuck like crazy and then they just end up pregnant anyways?
That happens a lot, actually.
Yep.
This one is borderline a fun fact, but not really. It's just more a fun story. You can say if it counts or not. The first time he got picked up by law enforcement was due to car theft, but not the car theft like okay, I took your car, I'm running for law enforcement, or I took it to sell it like he does later in his life. I mean, before he starts his run. He rented a car and only paid for the in-town fee. But what happened was his at the time girlfriend had left the city to go be with a family member and had dumped him and was basically calling it quits on Dallas or whatever. And he takes his girlfriend's mother with him to try and win her back, propose to her. And after he does all that, law enforcement catches up with him. It's like, you stole that car, which if he had faced law enforcement, he wouldn't have actually probably gotten in trouble at all, really. It's like, hey, I forgot to pay the fee, played it off, whatever. Probably would have been fine. Because it wasn't like he'd stolen it in the way that mattered,
Yeah, that's not car theft. That's just hopping a fine.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, the solution to that is just have him pay the extra fee. That's not even a crime. Come on. He's still paid for the rental.
Instead of talking with law enforcement and getting things squared away, which I think if he didn't, Clyde's thing is he doesn't like dealing with law enforcement, so he runs a lot. And I think that was what got him in trouble later on and what led him down this path, instead of just trying to clear shit up with law enforcement, which I'm not saying every time that would work and keep you from getting into trouble with law enforcement, but the way there's at least 2 or 3 points in the story where if Clyde just doesn't panic and just stops and talks with law enforcement, things don't get worse for him.
Like I said before, this is okay. I'm I'm gonna start a tally right now of every time you say something that just makes me think this just sounds like the small town meth head couple. Like exactly how the small town meth head couple would behave.
So the law enforcement showing up actually ended, even though he was proposed to his at the time girlfriend, kind of ended the relationship because he's just on the run and leaves the girlfriend and her mom stuck in that other town.
Meth head.
In January of 1930, Bonnie and Clyde finally meet. And there is a billion different ways that everyone says they met. Wikipedia, I didn't actually check the article, but it just says they met when Clyde was visiting a friend and Bonnie was at one of her friends laid up because she was recovering from a broken arm and was out of work. But my book that I listened to, which I will at the end give you my sources, said that they met at a engagement party for either Bonnie's sister or like sister-in-law. Basically, it was like an engagement party basically, and a friend of a friend or like whatever caused them to be there, and essentially it was love at first sight for them. Like they just like right then that party just they met for each other. But even though that romance was quick to blossom, it was soon stifled. You know why?
Meth.
Clyde's crimes previously had caught up to him, essentially. Like, during all this whole time, he's already started his crime spree, you know? Like, he's not an innocent boy already. Like, this, I think he's 18. He's like 10 or so months, or that was his parents. Like, they're within like a year and a half of each other born. Like, in February of 1930, he is jailed in Waco for petty crimes, but escapes on March 8th after Bonnie smuggles a gun into jail. Here's a guessing game for the fun fact. How did she smuggle that gun in? Because she was searched.
She hid it under her breasts.
No.
Oh, shit. Now I just sound like a pervert.
I mean, it's not any pervier than what she did. She wore a dress, and what she did is she took a belt and wrapped it around her thigh underneath the dress and used that to smuggle the gun in. And when she gets in to visit Clyde, because after she was searched, they didn't search her, like pat her down properly like we do now. They just like, okay, does it look like she's got anything? Check her belongings. Kind of like, is there any place she could have hidden it that we would think of? No one's going to think to check up the skirt of her dress. So that's what she did. And Clyde reaches through the bars, up her skirt, pulls the gun out, she leaves, and he escapes with the gun. So what is that?
I'd say it's borderline, but I'd say it's a sip. It's a good one, though. Breaking out your boyfriend because you know for a fact he's going to grope you through the bars of his prison cell is pretty solid.
Well, what's even funnier is he made her a map because he was locked up with someone else, and he gave her a map of the friend's place to find the gun. The map was wrong. She still finds the gun and brings it in. And this is someone she's known for like a month. This is a man she's been dating for a month. If that.
I think they were meant to be. I think this is great. Yeah, good for them. Good for them for finding love in a hopeless place.
Then, later that month, on the 19th, Clyde is captured. He is extradited to Texas and is sentenced to Eastham Prison Farm. And man, is this place...
Oh, a prison farm in the 1930s. I bet this place was just cheery.
It is currently known as J. Dale Wright Unit for the Texas Department of Corrections.
Oh, it still exists. Oh, wow.
Yes, it still exists to this day. It began before the Civil War was cleared by enslaved people. After the war, sharecroppers worked the land, but they were replaced by prisoners under contract with the convict leasing program. In 1896, Mrs. D. Eastham agreed to pay $14.5 per month per person for 119 convicted men, including many African Americans. It opened up, the unit, like it like became law enforcement in 1917.
Yeah, so this is one of those the continuation of plantation slavery long after the 13th Amendment.
Yeah, honestly it was. And Clyde fought not to get sent to Eastham prison. And they caught him in Ohio and extradited him back to Texas. Um,
The Texas the meth head was returning to his home. It's all meth heads lead back to Ohio.
Evidently. He actually had good cause not to get sent to Eastham. He had skilled labor. Like he was work experienced enough that he could have done one of the programs that kept him from going to the hard farm stuff, because this was borderline slavery on the prison farm. Like it legitimately was. They did not treat anyone well. They did not treat they were used and put up wet. It was not a pretty experience to be on that prison farm. Even for like prison, like it was not a good place to be.
Yeah, it's a labor camp.
Yeah, it was bad. And Clyde fought not to, but they still sent him to Eastham. Okay. During his time there, he ended up getting arrested for car robbery. That's what sent him there. And during his time there, he ended up being a target by one of the bigger prisoners, as unfortunately happens in a lot of prisons. He was raped.
Oh, no.
That is kind of, everyone says this is what changed him. I think he still had a lot of good in him before this, if you want to categorize it that. I don't think this fundamentally changed his character, his time here on Eastham. And this, like, he would scream for guards and trying to get help as he was repeatedly raped, and they just did nothing. And then another convict on the prison was like, "Hey, if you kill him, I'll take the rap. Like, I've already got a life sentence. I'll take the rap for it, but I ain't helping you any other way, really." Although it feels like he really did. So what happened was, after getting tired of this, Clyde finds a piece of metal rebar, calls his rapist to, I think it was the showers or the bathroom, whacks him over the head with it. Like, this probably enough to kill him right then and there. With that, like, not immediately, but like it would have been a mortal blow with that rebar. And then the other prisoner comes in with a shiv and just stabs him a bunch. And like Clyde makes away. Guards find the other prisoner who has a life sentence, and they put him up on trial, but the charges get dropped because that the rapist's like reputation was so bad that they're like, he was a bad person. Like, we don't care if a lifer killed another person.
I love early 20th century like Southern legal systems where legalized like penal slavery was perfectly acceptable as like a form of commerce, but you didn't really like the how bad the person you killed was like judged in your favor if you came to trial for their murder. Like yeah, you killed him in premeditated cold blood, but like he was kind of a dick, so who's to say if this was a bad thing?
Yeah. So his stint in prison goes along, whatever. He's there for about 2 years, and then approximately 2 weeks before he ends up. So during this whole time, his mom's petitioning the governor for a pardon, essentially, which was a lot more common back then, petitioning for a pardon, even if you were guilty. And it actually happened a lot more because, like, hey, we sentenced this person, but I bet you they learned their lesson, so they'll get pardoned, essentially. It happened a lot around this time, is what I've seen. So Clyde's mom, Cumi Barrow, is fighting for him. And fun fact, during this time, Bonnie meets Clyde's family during this time. which is something Clyde was deathly afraid of.
Did they like her?
Oh, they got along swimmingly. The reason why Clyde did not want Bonnie to meet his family is because Clyde was worried his mom would think Bonnie was a whore. And it was all religious. So growing up, Kumi Barrow was like super conservative raised and didn't believe in makeup. So she thought anyone who painted their face was a whore. And Bonnie was in that first flapper generation that really started embracing makeup to the degree that like we kind of see today. I mean, the styles were different, but like makeup culture was like just beginning to get its roots the way we see it today. And Bonnie really played into that. And Clyde was worried about that.
Yeah, good for her. Good for her. Good for Bonnie. I like that about her.
Sip?
Yeah, sure, let's sip.
It was a fun fact, and it was not in my notes. I remembered that off the top. And during this time, they're going back and forth, sending letters, like, and they're ootsy cootsy. And actually, at a certain point, Bonnie stops sending letters because it's been 2 years. She was dating this man for a month before he gets arrested, and then she snakes him out. Like, and then while he's arrested, he helps him break out. But then, like 2 weeks later, he's recaptured. Like, it's assumed she would move on, like with how quick that.
Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't blame her.
It's 100% fair.
I think the more meth head thing would be for her to be loyal through the whole prison stint.
No, there's another fun fact that you'll see. Like I'll get to it once. Like it's just coming up. Towards the end of his stint at Etham prison, he comes up with an idea to get out of the labor part of his prison sentence, and he cuts off 2 of his toes, permanently crippling himself. Not to the point like he's handicapped, obviously, but like
he couldn't just pretend to have tuberculosis or something.
They didn't give a shit about that kind of shit. When you were sick, if you were bleeding out, that's the only time you were getting out of labor. They went into this a little bit, but like TB is really hard to fake for one. Like it was called consumption at the time, but like coughing up blood and like if you were just coughing up blood, they weren't going to give a shit.
Hey, I've got the solution right here, right now. Listen to this. Coal dust under the eyes, ketchup packets in the mouth. Done.
Derek, I don't think ketchup packets were invented.
Shut up. Fuck you.
This was all for naught because within 2 weeks, Kumi Barrow, Clyde's mother, successfully...
You know what? Hold on. No. Hold on. No. Fuck you. Hold on. When were ketchup packets invented?
Okay. No, hold on. Before you finish looking that up, we need to take a bet. Whoever wins gets to shot. Okay, I'm going to argue a shot. If they were not invented, we have to take a shot. If they were, we take, 3 sips? What do you want to bet on it?
Yeah, that works. Win 3 sips, lose shot?
Yes.
Okay, and what year was this? This was like 1930, right?
It was 1932, February, is when he gets paroled.
Fuck!
When were they invented?
1955.
Shot, brother! Cheers!
Bros.
Clyde cuts off his toes and to try and get out of labor, but 2 weeks later, his mom's successful.
They grow back.
No, his mom is successful and petitioning for his release, and he gets pardoned in February of 32.
So he gets out of jail. 2 weeks after cutting off his toe.
He's walking out on crutches. Could you imagine that? You're imprisoned or whatever scenario, you've had your freedom taken from you, and to get out of the physical labor they're forcing you to do, you physically disable yourself, but your mom gets you out, his petition for your release, 2 weeks after you've crippled yourself.
I'm actually adding that to the meth head tally because that's good.
What's funny is Clyde didn't even like to drink too much because he didn't especially when he's on the run, because he didn't want to be in an altered state of mind in case he had to run from the law enforcement. So there was a short descent into crime before like shit really hit the fan with Bonnie and Clyde. They're doing crime after he gets out, because immediately after he gets out, he goes to Bonnie, and she is living with her then new boyfriend. History has forgot his name, or else I would have included it. But as soon as Clyde walks in the door, Bonnie runs to him and just like, "You're mine again," kind of thing. And the guy just walks out in shame.
That poor fucking guy. That poor guy.
I feel so bad for him. I'm taking a drink in his honor. History forgot his name, but
In my head, I'm just imagining this guy was just like top of his class in high school, like a published author.
think the top of the line guy, like the amazing person. Bonnie's just like, no. Funny story. The bad boy syndrome, which is also known as the Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, actually kind of like Bonnie actually had that. It was like, that's what happened here. There's a reason why it's called Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, because it's like this is one of the first big cases of like, yes, I have to have the bad boy, at least in American history, like that caught the nation's attention.
To all of our nerds who have ever lost a girl to the meth head jock.
Cheers. On April 30th, the Barrow Gang decide it becomes a full gang at this point. It's not just Bonnie and Clyde. There's a few people. Bonnie didn't ever really participate in a lot of the robberies or thievery. Later on, she does participate in the firefights, but the actual like thievery and like the active crimes, not the like running away, trying to like essentially defend yourself, running away part, that's the only part she really played an active role in throughout this story. So keep that in the back of your head. The Barrow Gang decides to rob a store owner named by J.N. Butcher. And their scheme was that they would go in and ask for change late at night, because some store owners would be willing to be woken up, or like when their store was closed, like to make a sale. Like, hey, like if it was a local small town thing, it's not like grab a couple things and you're gone. It wasn't a big deal back then.
The kids, the damn millennials today don't know true worth at work ethic. You're not willing to be woken up in the middle of the night by a meth head asking for change.
Yeah, and Clyde didn't want to participate in this robbery because he knew the butcher, like not personally, but the butchers like knew him, knew his face kind of thing. So he didn't want to get recognized. So he acted as the getaway driver. And what went wrong with this is when they asked to break change for a large bill. And this is really the culture shock of how like money is different. They said a large bill was a 5 or a 10 at the time. You happen to keep change in your safe to break a 5 or a 10? That feels insane.
Yeah, at that point, like you're making change in like pennies and quarters. Like,
yeah, no, it's a very different economic climate at the time. Like I mean, obviously, buying power is way different, but like just for
this is like right around the same time they're getting off the gold standard, and you have this huge inflation that that makes like the kind of starts to make like the value of the dollar that we kind of have today is right around this time is when that's happening. You're getting a huge influx of fiat cash into the economy through Roosevelt's New Deal, just so that he could like fucking pay for all of the new like reforms that he's doing. So yeah, like $5 is a big bill. It's like
it was for the time. It feels weird to us today, but
yeah, but like that's probably the last time that was ever the case. Is this story?
This time is probably the last time. When they're going in to rob him, and like he was like, they tricked him into opening the safe, but when he opened the safe, the issue was in the safe was a gun, so they end up shooting and killing him. And so they were worried he was going to turn on them and like shoot them instead of giving them the money and running. And so he drives off, and while they're on the run from this murder, the gang gets split up, and a couple of the people will get arrested. And while they're on the run, Bonnie and Clyde are running, and they go into a small town, steal a car, another one. Clyde was particularly fond of a specific model of Ford. I can't remember what model it was, but he was fond of Fords in general, which, fun fact, later became a fun thing for Ford because Henry Ford claimed he got a letter from Clyde that had the wrong middle name. I don't know if it was the Champion part or if it was a different middle name, but saying, "Oh, I love your thing," even though I keep puffing up Ford, and Ford was like all proud of this, and it was likely a forgery actually because of the middle name issue. So I think that's a sip worthy.
Yeah, it's a sip.
And while they're on the run after they've split up.
So sorry, hold on. I'm just imagining like the 8th or 9th time he's stolen one of these Fords, and he's opening up the glove compartment. He's like, "Why do every single one of these cars has a copy of the Protocols of Elders of Zion?" Did you know that was a thing?
No.
Henry Ford did was every single car he sold had a copy of the Protocols of Elders of Zion in the glove compartment. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, Henry Ford was a Nazi.
So while they're on the run after this, the gang gets split up. Bonnie and Clyde and I think a third person are on the run. They hit a small town, and they steal another car, and they're like out in the woods running away, and that car gets buried in mud because it's raining. It's like really wet. And they sneak off to a nearby farm, which so happens to be a doctor. And they steal the doctor's horse or donkey, I can't remember which, running away, and the third member of the gang and Bonnie end up getting caught. Clyde is able to get away, and Bonnie is a little bit bitter about this, but not like super bad. Like she was steamed, but she wasn't pissed at Clyde. It wasn't going to end the relationship, you know. And remember how we were talking about drop charges earlier? Once they finally bring Bonnie up on charges, they're just like, well, I didn't do anything. Like, honestly, she hadn't really done anything at this point either. Yeah, she had done stuff wrong, but like in the grand scheme of the Barrow Gang's stuff, she hadn't really done anything wrong considerably.
Yeah, this is the period where the good-hearted but troubled girl starts dating the meth head. It isn't quite into meth herself yet.
She's just starting her meth journey.
Yeah, she's just had her very first taste of meth, and it kind of sucked. It was a bad high, but she still loves him. So I love this little shtick that we've got going.
You're the one who started it, and as it goes, they just basically drop the charges against Bonnie because they don't really think she's done anything wrong. And arguably she has, but she hasn't. You know, like she's an accessory. She's done all that, but she hasn't really been an active participant. She just kind of sat there. And as time's gone on, we're into 33. Clyde's brother Buck gets a full pardon because Kumi Barrow family was important to the entire Barrow family. Like, they cared about each other. Like, they may have been dysfunctional, but they gave a shit, you know?
Yeah, like a meth family.
Buck goes and tries to convince Clyde to turn himself in. You need to do because Clyde, remember, there's only, up until this point, there's only been one murder. And that was his rapist. Like that Clyde was actually actively like premeditation on all that. Like he did.
Right.
In fact, Clyde only commits 2 premeditated murders in his entire career.
That's still a larger number than the average person, I'm going to say.
Would you not have killed the rapist if you were in Clyde's shoes?
No, I'm not saying like the first one was a bad one. I'm just saying like that's more than most people do.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, and then Clyde's brother ends up joining the Barrow Gang, even though he goes to convince Clyde not to commit more crimes. And it's more like a half-hearted join. Like he's joining him on like the little, okay, I stole a car, like the small thieveries, not the big like, okay, we got to get out of Dodge crimes. And they're in
He can change them from the inside.
He's in Joplin, Missouri during this. They're in Joplin, like kind of staying in the same area.
Hey, Joplin mentioned Zip.
Essentially, during this time, it's just like a big party for Clyde and Buck, kind of like they're getting drunk, playing cards every night, and this actually leads to law enforcement being called, and not because of the noise or whatever. They thought there was a bootlegging operation going on, so they don't even know what's going on. Like law enforcement doesn't actually. What happens here is Clyde and Buck and Bonnie kind of overreact, and they see law enforcement. They just immediately start shooting. And Buck isn't on his own when he came over here. I forgot to mention, he is with his wife, Blanche.
Uh, he's brought his wife along. Hold on, real quick. So, anyways, I start blasting.
Yeah. Anyway, I started firing. Like I said, they ran drunk card games, got pretty noisy, and eventually law enforcement gets called. Law enforcement thinks they're dealing with a smuggling operation. They're not smuggling, but bootlegging operation. They're not really going in there like guns a-blazing, thinking stuff's going to go down. But I think this is where it really starts to show Clyde was scared of prison. He did not want to go back. He refused. Like that's when he didn't want to be re-victimized.
I don't blame him.
I think that's really, I think that's what dug his hole deeper is like Clyde was scared of being re-victimized in prison. He was a shorter man. He was the epitome of I don't want to use the M word, the short person syndrome. Because they started blasting, they had to run, and it led to this funny scene where Blanche almost gets left behind because she's chasing after her dog. And they grab her in the street, pull her in. It doesn't say what happens to the dog, whether this dog got taken along or the dog was left behind. So sorry, Tay, if you're listening to our podcast for the... I don't even know if you listen to it, but like we don't know what happens to the dog. We don't know if they lived or died. I like to think they lived. So happy ending.
I'm gonna disagree with you there. This is the 1930s. That dog was eaten.
Fuck you, Derek. I want a happy ending in my head. Fuck you.
This is Missouri in the 1930s. That dog was eaten.
This shootout and this subsequent run left a lot of like personal items behind, and this led to an image of Bonnie going around as a gun-wielding, cigar-smoking woman. And this was...
Hell yes. That is my type. Hell yes.
This is something she would come to resent. I think they liked playing up and dressing for like camera photos, and to the end of their days, they would claim Bonnie was not a cigar smoker. In the photo that I saw, it's on the Wikipedia article. It doesn't look like she's actively smoking. It looks like she, like, you know, like when a kid plays with their dad's pipe. It felt like, and posing for photos, it felt like that.
Yeah, she had her meth pipe like tucked away in her jacket pocket.
You keep going back to the meth, and it's killing me.
It keeps coming up. I can't help the similarities. Wait, should I count that one as part of the tally?
Yes.
Okay, we're up to 7. What have I created?
And from here on June 10th of 33, Clyde was driving a vehicle and failed to see a bridge under construction sign, leading him to flip over his vehicle he was driving. And this ended up permanently crippling Bonnie.
Oh, it's not funny, but...
He flipped it into a ravine. And there are two thought processes on how Bonnie got her leg like crippled. There's no one's like sure which one's the correct answer. So either part of the fuel got onto her leg after the flipping and it like ignited, scarring her leg, or the battery leaked its acid onto her leg somehow. It sounded like a really bad crash flipping. Like it was not a I didn't just do it justice. Like it was a bad crash.
So it's like some sort of burn.
It was a burn of some sort, either fire or acid burn.
Ooh, that sucks. That's such a Looney Tunes way to crash, though.
It is, honestly, it is. During this time, they don't seek real medical professionals. Like they go on, they triage her, and they even stop by a doctor. Like there's this doctor that was known. I think he was a doctor. There was a person known to treat bandits on the run, essentially, and like give like triage, essentially. Not even like not even medical care, like more triage. Like okay, get you out of the panic zone and let you go to your next area. Keep being on the run. They mentioned his name, but I didn't remember.
So it looks like your leg is burned. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna do 5 Our Fathers, and then you're gonna take all of this laudanum and cocaine.
They actually, I think it was laudanum they had her on. They had her on a painkiller that she was almost borderline addicted to. That would like put her into La La Land. And when she wasn't on that, she was essentially going with the draws and was angry at Blanche and Buck. The only person that she wasn't really feisty with was Clyde.
So she was literally addicted to like the early 20th century version of coke.
And so they're on the run. They're trying to treat Bonnie's injury, and it heals somewhat. But when you don't let things heal properly, you know how like injuries will be tight and you don't have your full range of motion. Essentially, she wasn't able to really walk anymore after this. She could hop around, but she didn't have full walking movement.
I can picture exactly how she walked actually.
Eventually in July, they visit Platte City, Missouri, and they were staying in 2 cabins, and this is where they were trying to nurse Bonnie back to health. Like I think she was out of the danger zone at this point, but she was like you still had to keep changing your bandages and all that stuff. And so Clyde and W.D. Jones, which is like one of the bigger names that went through the Barrow Gang. I didn't really pay attention to the names except for like W.D. Jones and the guy who betrays Bonnie and Clyde later on. Everyone knows they were betrayed. It's not really a spoiler. They're in town. They're going out to purchase supplies. Essentially, they're getting food and medical stuff to take care of Bonnie. And the local druggist, which is like basically their term for a drugstore owner or whatever, the guy running the shop for a drugstore, is like, hey, we're supposed to be watching out for these patterns. So it tells the local sheriff. And the local sheriff's like, that was probably part of the Barrow Gang. And rounds up a posse. And at 11 p.m., they go in and try and get Bonnie and Clyde. And what ends up happening is they take their Thompson, yes, sorry.
Yeah, Thompson submachine guns. Yeah, they got some Tommy guns. Hell yeah.
Yeah. And end up shooting Buck in the head.
Oh, no, that's not good.
As in, you see his brain. However, Buck is still fucking alive during this.
Wow, what a fucking guy. Holy shit.
He's not... He's in worse condition than Bonnie was, though. He's
on that meth rage.
He should not be able... He somehow holds, like he's like in and out of coherency, essentially, like as you would expect someone like dealing with that level of injury. But every once in a while he'll like have like lucid moments. He was able to sit up sometimes and eat. He wasn't like good to like start walking around kind of good, like, but like, okay, I kind of lean forward, sit up kind of thing. You're not really like full motion kind of thing is what I've just described.
Meth rage.
Possibly. And during this, actually, Blanche is almost blinded.
Oh, great. What did the cops do this time?
When they were firing, some of the glass that they were firing through got into her eyes. And she still has glass in her eyes as they're running. She has no vision in one, like fuzzy, barely able to see in the other. And
so this gang is... You've got one person with a limp who's hooked on laudanum. You've got one person whose brain is exposed. You've got one person whose eyes are full of glass shards. And then you have Clyde.
You got one perfectly good person that is like no injuries as far as we know, W.D. Jones. And then you have Clyde, who was already a cripple because he cut 2 of his toes off. Who was, by all notes, one of the best car drivers at the time. Like, he probably, I don't know if I don't think NASCAR was around, but like, he could have done, if NASCAR was, he would have been fucking amazing.
Born too early for both meth and NASCAR. What a tragedy.
And as they're on the run from this, they end up going to Dexter, Iowa, where they're hiding in a defunct amusement park. And they end up getting surrounded.
Oh, that is my fucking that is my 1930s abandoned amusement park is such a good fucking aesthetic. Holy shit, what a great, just a perfect scene for the movie shot for this shootout. That is so awesome.
And they're surrounded by approximately like 100 law enforcement is I think what I saw. Like, the rest of the Barrow gang end up getting away, but Buck is shot in the arm and is left behind along with his wife Blanche. And Blanche is taken in along with Buck. And Buck ends up surviving 3 more days with his brain exposed and like a debilitating shoulder injury, gunshot wound. He ends up passing due to his brain injury, like his head injury and the shoulder pneumonia, essentially. Like, Buck was next level built different.
Guy was a fucking space marine. Holy shit.
Blanche loses eyesight in one eye. And remember, this is multiple days where she has glass just actively in her eye. And it's not until she is captured do they take even part of it out. And like over several days, they're like slowly taking some of the glass out as she's being questioned and all that. And sad, unfortunate fact is one day, the day Buck dies, Blanche essentially is like, he's dead, isn't he?
That really sucks. Damn.
It really does. In this story, I found a person that I hate respecting, but I kind of do. Our next topic is Frank Hammer.
Wow, what a name.
Yes. Francis Augustus Hammer was born March 17th, 1884.
His middle name is Augustus.
Yes.
Francis Augustus Hammer. This sounds like the second place choice for like the Punisher's name. Like, it was Frank Castle and then Frank Hammer was the second choice.
This man was built different. Do you know when he died? Like, how old he was?
I'm guessing it was like in his 90s.
He was an American lawman and Texas Ranger, but he was an interesting Texas Ranger because when he felt like there was a governor of Texas that he didn't agree with, he just dropped out of the Rangers for a little bit and went and did private work. Like, he was a Pinkerton. He was private law. Like, he was involved in that, like, not law enforcement, but like law enforcement adjacent field and in the Texas Rangers back and forth for years. And then in we're talking, so he's the man who leads this squad after a while of searching for Bonnie and Clyde to find them. And he is in his 50s when he's doing this. He's tracking down Bonnie and Clyde. He reconstructs Clyde's routes. He figures out how Clyde's traveling. He's figuring out how he's doing he travels thousands upon thousands of miles to figure out how Clyde is getting away and escaping and staying on the road the way he is. And like, he's had a prolific history. He would make a great topic for one of your episodes. I'm not going to lie. Even although he does stray into mine, I just like the history component of his is so insane. He just figures out how they do that, and he starts tracking Bonnie and Clyde. And he ends up talking with someone who ended up someone's family. So what happens is Bonnie and Clyde eventually add another member to the Barrow Gang, who they break out of prison, named Henry Methbin.
Come on. They've literally got a member of their gang named Meth.
What happens is Methbin was close to getting... His parents thought he was close to being paroled, or like, I can't remember if his sentence was close, when Bonnie and Clyde broke him out. And what happened is Bonnie and Clyde went to free like 4 people from their gang from Eastham is what you said? I'm bad at remembering. Eastham prison. Eastham. And what this marks Clyde's second premeditated murder. They end up killing a guard who was the evil guard, is the best way I could describe it. He kicked the prisoners when they were down, metaphorically speaking. He was the most rotten apple there, because I guarantee a lot of the guards are rotten, but this was the rotten apple, you know?
And they find out that the whole tree is rotten.
Yeah. They didn't really have an active reason to murder him, even though they were breaking prisoners out, but like, I really can't blame that premeditation from that. Like,
motive means an opportunity. I think that's enough.
Yeah, like, while they were working out this deal between Methbin's family and all that, they asked for a full pardon from Methbin's. What happened is Henry Methbin was hitchhiking, and this is why he was locked up. And he was picked up, and apparently the person who gave him a ride tried to make a sexual advance. Supposedly, that's his story. Whether that's historically right or whatever is like, we'll never know, because it was 2 different people, you know.
That's really interesting, though, actually.
The person who picked him up, claims they made a sexual advance that was untoward, because it was male, it was homosexual, like it was very taboo at the time. And so he ends up attempting to kill the guy who gave him a ride and stole his car. And the guy survives, goes to law enforcement, and Henry Methbin's locked up, charged with attempted murder and theft of vehicle, or whatever the term for that is. Bonnie and Clyde break him out. His parents work out a deal. If they turn over Bonnie and Clyde, he gets pardoned, essentially.
So the guy who finally gets Bonnie and Clyde in the end is a guy named Meth.
You could argue, yes. Yes, you could argue that.
I so fucking called it. I called it at the beginning of this episode.
And the reason why we themed this as, like, I didn't start it at the beginning. I might add something to the recording later. This is our April 1st episode, because the next set of murders Bonnie and Clyde commit are on April 1st. What happens is they're pulled off to the side of the road, enjoying a snack or meal, whatever. And 2 highway patrol, Texas, like brand new highway patrol officers, because they had just introduced Texas Highway Patrol at this point. Like it's an early of the program, rolled up on the Barrow Gang. And I think it was just Henry and Bonnie and Clyde. And the officers don't even know it's the Barrow Gang. They just see someone pulled off the road. Maybe they're broken down. Maybe they have a flat tire. Maybe we can help them out. Because at this time, they're not doing a whole lot on the highway patrol. They're basically helping with like broken down people at this point. It's not like they're chasing people down. Like it's early in the program.
Yeah, they're not like the shitty secret police that they are now.
Yeah. Henry freaks out and just starts firing.
So anyways, I start blasting.
Because he's scared. Yeah, essentially. And Clyde resolves to finish them off because, like, okay, we've already fired on them. The officers didn't have... One of the officers didn't even fucking have their shotgun loaded. They supposedly, someone who witnessed it claimed that Bonnie finished off one of the officers indiscriminately, like, bounced his head off with, like, their shot or something like that. It doesn't really match the description of the event that I really saw. Like, it was described in the book, the way, like, the interaction went. I don't really see that. Bonnie may have fired onto the officers. And the reason why this was a big deal is, one, cops don't like cop killers, even back then. But two, one of the officers that was with them was a rookie, and he was seen as like this innocent. This was literally like one of his first patrols, and he was set to be married in a couple weeks. He was living at the YMCA. He had an apartment rolled up for his fiance and him to move into after they signed their nuptials. Like, just like going into like, this man had a good future ahead of him.
Okay, besides all of like the meth jokes I've been making so far, this reads like an actual movie script.
Honestly, Bonnie and Clyde's life feels like a movie script, and it's funny because there have been multiple media adaptations, movies, TV shows, and all that of it, and they've never really told the story accurately. From what I understand, I'm probably not doing a great accurate story. I'm trying to be more accurate than the books, and not the books, but the media adaptions that were bad, like the early '60s movie and all that. But it's just they lean into the criminal life or whatever, and the description that we currently like, kind of the zeitgeist of Bonnie and Clyde is they were more into this lifestyle than they really were, I feel like. Yes, Bonnie was ride or died for Clyde, and Clyde was on the run and didn't want to, but it felt more like he was running because he just refused to go back to jail. He was scared of being re-victimized, is the way I read it. It wasn't, well, fuck the law, I don't care about the law. I think it was literally, he didn't want to be vulnerable like that again in prison, and that's what pushed him to do all this. If he had stopped and like sat down and like been reasonable a couple times within this story, I don't think they die this way. Would they maybe still be infamous criminals and maybe have died later? And this point, who knows? Like, you can't predict the intricacies of the flow of the river. But I feel like they didn't have to end this way. But with the way he was viewing it, I don't know if Clyde could have seen another option from his like scared child like reaction to all this, you know? In May of 1934, we were that April thing was in 34, by the way. Like, I know I'm skipping around the timeline, but like I'm just getting the big highlight parts. Like I said, like I'm not going to go into super details on certain things because we could be here forever. We could not. It's whatever. And during that April 1st, fun fact, is when the bunny comes in. So the bunny was originally bought as a Easter gift for Bonnie's mother.
Wait. A bunny?
Remember the intro when I said you're scared like a bunny in their second gunfight?
Oh shit! Yeah. Okay, this is. Oh, I was so focused on the rebar on the skull of a rapist that I completely missed that one.
Yeah. So during that firefight is the second firefight they were talking about, and Bonnie bought her mother a bunny rabbit as an Easter gift, and ended up having the bunny go through 2 gunfights with law enforcement.
Oh my god, that poor bunny.
Before she can gift it to her mother.
Here, happy Easter, Mom. Here's a traumatized bunny. Okay, another... gifting a traumatized pet to a family member is another method thing to do.
What is it?
That's a...
Sip or shot?
That's a shot, man. So good. That's so fucking good.
I knew you would say a shot on that one. That's probably going to be our last shot, by the way.
Prost.
Cheers. So, in May of 34, the Barrow Gang is... And I've kind of skipped over this, but visiting family was a big thing for the Barrow Gang. I mentioned it earlier, saying family was important to the Barrows in particularly. But Bonnie and Clyde visited Dallas often. They stopped and said their families. And their families, while not approving of the lifestyle, refused to shun the people they cared about because of their actions like that. It really was like a really interesting period for them because like they kept trying to convince them to go away from this path that they could kind of set themselves on, but I don't think Clyde would have allowed it. Bonnie was ride or die for Clyde. This isn't really what she saw coming, but like she they knew they were gonna die an early death at this point. Like the writing was on the wall for them. They weren't dissolute. They weren't deluging themselves. Oh, I'm gonna get away. I'm gonna be the one who lives to be 60, 70 years old. They were under no pretenses on that. So in May of 34, they spent an extended period of time visiting Methvin's family. And it was during this time that they like shored up the deal with law enforcement, making sure that Henry would actually like betray Bonnie and Clyde. And so they set it up where next time they got separated, Bonnie and Clyde from Henry, that he would run over and like they would have a essentially pre-established rallying point a certain period of time after they were separated. And what they happened is they were visiting a diner and Henry was going in to grab their food and then take it out to Bonnie and Clyde. But an unrelated law enforcement officer, I can't remember if they knew it was Bonnie and Clyde or not, but it was literally just like an off car driving by, panicked Bonnie and Clyde and Henry. I don't think Henry knew the cop, but basically surmised like law enforcement or something, because Bonnie and Clyde peel out. Clyde is always the driver. He's like a hot rod behind the wheel, and they run off. And they had this pre-established rallying point to meet at the Methvin's family home, but they had planned like a certain period of time, and the initial meetup didn't go that way. So Bonnie and Clyde got to live another day. But then the day after, they met back up, and what happened is Ivy Methvin, Henry's father, had staged his car in a way where it looked like he was changing or had a flat tire to get Bonnie and Clyde to pull over. And nearby and like hidden were like four part of the posse trying to capture Bonnie and Clyde. Before they're even like, I mean, they're stopped, but they're like full, not in like, they're not in park essentially. And well, it was a manual, so there's no real park on that, but whatever. And one of the officers starts to stand up to like say, "Hey, surrender," but another one is so nervous that they immediately fire and kill Clyde by hitting him dead center in the forehead.
Fuck.
And yeah, not literally dead center, but like they get a headshot and he's dead immediately. From there, there's enough time for Bonnie to register that Clyde is dead. The vehicle has started lurching forward because the engine was still on. It was a manual. There's no neutral. There's not whatever. So it slowly inches forward. Law enforcement panics and starts firing. Bonnie has enough time to realize what happens and starts screaming because she's scared. They don't have time to surrender. Clyde wouldn't have surrendered. He just wouldn't have. But they start firing hundreds of rounds into this vehicle as Bonnie's screaming, and then she obviously dies fairly quickly too because it's hundreds of rounds. They're using Tommy guns, they're Browning automatic rifles. I can't remember exactly what, but like they're sending round upon round, and once I'm assuming they run out of bullets, they calm down, they realize what's happening, and they're going to investigate, and they're already pulling out a camera to record. The gunpowder is still in the fucking air when they're recording on camera.
Wait, is that footage like on YouTube? Can I go find that?
I didn't look it up, but I wouldn't be surprised. My book just described the footage for me, and it was like the gunpowder is still in the air essentially. And what you got to understand is this was on a road that it's not busy by our standards, but it's busy for a small town standard. And this is in Arcadia, Louisiana. There is a logging truck that was was down the road, like near enough by to know what the fuck's going on. And as soon as the gunfire had erupted, apparently the driver and like two hitchhikers he had with him are fucking bolted in the woods, scared. After things have settled down, the logger and the hitchhikers go up to see what the fuck happened, and they're there and they're investigating. They radio back and they figure that out, and then like there's more loggers in the area. It's not just that one logging truck. So the nearby people in the area, the people who live here, are all coming to investigate. Like, this wasn't like in the middle of nowhere. This was like on the outskirts of town where everyone fucking heard it. You know what I mean? Like, it just became a spectacle. And this is what I was getting at earlier. This is like, I think they should have at least tried to get Bonnie and Clyde to surrender. I don't think they would have, so I don't think it really ended up hurting at the end of the day. Like, it's like with a warrant, you're supposed to announce yourself, say, hey, police, whatever. But sometimes they won't be penalized if they just break in before they announce it or whatever, or if they jump the gun a little bit when they're supposed to wait a certain period of time. I don't think that really harms it in a big period. Just like I don't think them shooting Bonnie and Clyde really harms legality wise. Like, Bonnie and Clyde were not going to surrender. Like, they knew they were going to die young. They would have fought it out. I don't think that changed the outcome of that thing, that encounter. I think Bonnie and Clyde were not walking away from there, regardless of if they actually got the chance to surrender or not. I think it would have been the same outcome. And maybe that's just me being naive about law enforcement. I'm just being practical. I don't think either one of them would have surrendered, and I think it would have been a gunfight. Should that guy have started firing before they had a chance to at least ask for surrender? No. But I don't think that changes the outcome. If anything, it may be part of the posse doesn't at least get injured or killed. But, like, Bonnie and Clyde didn't even have a chance to raise their guns. Like, which they would have, honestly. The thing that sickens me afterward is they started covering their asses and claimed they started to lift their guns. Like, they were about to rain hellfire, essentially, down on the posse. Because immediately afterwards, and they're spitting out the word, they start covering their asses. And this was all led by Hammer, orchestrated by Hammer. He was the mover and builder, whatever that term is. He did the groundwork. And Ivy Methbin, after the gunfighting calms down, rolls out of wherever the fuck he hid. Because I don't know how he didn't die as well. Because they just fired upon there. And like, he should have been caught in the crossfire, but wasn't. And I was telling you about how it became a spectacle because everyone was like, there's shots everywhere.
I feel like there's a lesson to be learned in that, is that no matter the greatest efforts by the police and law enforcement, meth always wins.
Maybe. As this is going on, like I said, like, people notice, so it's getting there. They left two of the posse to kind of guard the vehicle, but very clearly, quickly, they get overrun. People are trying to cut off Clyde's ear. Someone's trying to get a lock of Bonnie's hair, and
oh, these fucking assholes. God, I hate people.
This is what disgusts me more, not the law enforcement's treatment, because, like, I don't agree wholeheartedly with how the law enforcement handled it, but I don't think they're wholly wrong for the way they handled it, if you know what I mean. It's something I'm really divided on, but, like, I can't really condemn the posse for that, you know? As much as, like, it shouldn't have gone that way, but, like, I don't see any other outcome really being effective. I know I'm repeating myself now, but the part I really don't like is they should have left the majority of the gang there, left Ivy there, and guarding the vehicle, guarding the bodies, instead of letting the looky-loos come in and, like, try to, one, contaminate the scene, but two, mess with the bodies, get their own souvenirs. Part of the agreement was the posse would split whatever the Barrow gang had on them when they were taken down, essentially whatever Bonnie and Clyde had, the guns, the vehicle, even though it was a stolen vehicle, all that. And they left two, sent two. I think it was a 4-person posse. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. And went to get a tow truck and to tow the vehicle. They left the bodies in there, which honestly, given the circumstances, probably the smartest bet. And there's about to be a fun fact trauma, but I'm not quite there. People tried to get basically a souvenir off of Bonnie and Clyde, which is honestly disgusting to me. Wanting a piece of someone's hair, their ear, or whatever, because they're a famous outlaw, is just a really bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, the ear is a weird one, especially because, like, That's not gonna last. Like that's gonna decay. Like this is not something you're.
You can preserve it. They could have. They could have.
I mean, yeah, but I don't think these country bumpkins are gonna be fucking trying to preserve this thing. I think they're just gonna be showing it off, and then eventually they're. I think actually they're just gonna fucking lose it before they actually like it actually decays. Yeah.
That's probably the more least realistic thing. So they get into town. Hammer's calling up, "We got him," and he's covering his ass, saying, "Oh, they were raising their guns or whatever," which scummy, but like whatever. It's not. It's really, even if you're covering your ass, you're not. It really didn't change the outcome. I genuinely don't think it would have changed anything. Like they were still probably going to be gunned down that day, even if they were given the proper chance, at least the proper warning. Hammer's trying to make excuses, but telling them, "Hey, we got him." Blah 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 blah. They send for a tow truck to go pick up the car to like escort the bodies to the local morgue slash mortuary, whatever it was back then. And it just so happens that while they were towing it past a school, the tow truck broke down. Fun fact.
And I'm sure there's a gang of people ready to come and get more souvenirs off of these bodies, wasn't
It wasn't even that. It was during like either recess or the end of the day, and the children saw the vehicle broken down with bullet holes all over it, with white sheets over dead bodies. Can anyone say trauma much? The children tried to investigate. So like they traumatized the children, bringing it up there. They eventually get it to the local morgue, and the Parker and the Barrow families both travel out to retrieve the bodies, and they have them brought home to Dallas. And one of the wishes for Bonnie and Clyde was that they be buried together. Unfortunately, that would not happen because
it? Oh, fuck these guys. That you could give them at least that.
it wasn't the Barrow family. It was specifically Bonnie's mom. She was so pissed that Clyde had her in life because he, from her point of view, he ruined her life. She would not let him have her in death. And what ended up happening is Clyde ended up getting buried with his brother Buck because they got dual plots. They got a plot essentially, hey, a big headstone they could barely afford at the time, but like they knew Clyde wasn't going to live a long, like it was a, like foregone conclusion. They bought this thing with when they buried Buck that Clyde would be buried with him like later on, like nearby. Like it wasn't like a married one, but like just sibling plot together or whatever. Because Clyde was not going to live a long life, and he knew this. Bonnie knew this. It wasn't. They weren't delusioned to think they were going to live a long period of time and whatever, you know.
What a fucking life. Like, I can't imagine living.
Oh, I've still got some stuff about their death.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking, like, what a way to live. Like, that sounds fucking miserable. That's not. It's not worth it. It's just not.
The Parker and Barrow families petitioned for the posse members to essentially give over the fruits of like what was found on the body to help pay for shit because they both families were like impoverished. I would say the Barrow family more than the Parker family, but they were still comparable essentially. And that was denied. And later on, one of the posse members took the car because they were entitled to the spoils of the whatever Bonnie and Clyde had, and went on a tour with it. And the original owner of the car sued for ownership. He ended up giving it back, but then renting it from her to tour with that. And part of both families went on this tour with him after a while to make money because it was hard to make money at the time and all that. And during one of these tours, they toured in Hammer's town where he settled down. Everyone knew who had betrayed Bonnie and Clyde, but law enforcement pretended like, oh no, we're not telling you who did it. We're not blah. Our informants are informants. tried to do that. And during one of the performances, Hammer stood up and just like basically into the show was like, that I will not divulge who that was, blah 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 blah, even though anyone with two plus two equals four kind of shit. It was obviously Henry, sorry. And like, but Hammer, as flawed as like, he worked for the Pinkertons, he couldn't have been that good of a guy. He worked for the Texas Rangers and all that. He was a pig. He a cab. All cops are bastards, but he seemed to have at least some kind of moral code he refused to give up, and I can kind of respect that from him.
Yeah, I'm not. I will never say like I hate cops. I don't like the concept of cops, but like the idea that cops can't have like a moral code is ridiculous. It's just the fact that that moral code is often like ridiculously flawed. But like they can have a code, and that code can mean something sometimes. Absolutely, yeah, that's completely believable. That's just human.
And that kind of ends the story of Bonnie and Clyde, at least from my research, like that I did on this story. It's just everything I heard about it, like kind of blew them up to bigger than life. I feel like if the story I heard from this book is as my main base of research, I watched a few YouTube videos and they kind of added to my thing, but I didn't really base my story, my timeline, my script off of them, so I have not citing them. They were just kind of like background building, I guess, if you want to call that. It's a wonder they actually are as well known as they are, to be honest, because they didn't do like, yes, they were outlaws on the run, but it's really the media interpretations after their death that led them to be as big of figures as they were in our eyes. Like they got blown up as bigger than life. Even during their day, they were blown up as bigger than life, but that kind of like washed away pretty quickly. And then the media, like movies, dramas, and all that reinterpreted their life, really is what caused their infamy to live today.
Yeah, it's the factor of like the true crime mixed with the romance story is it adds like a romantic flair to it that really catches people's imagination, which I can appreciate because that's actually a really good story. That's a really compelling story. I really like them as morbid as it is to say because they were real life human beings with real life motivations. They make very compelling characters in yeah.
Oh, they do. Um, Before I forget, because I think I forgot to do it in our Theranos episode, I'm going to go ahead and cite my source. So I listened to Go Down Together, The True Untold Story of Bonnie and Clyde by Jeff Guinn, Guinn. And then I also used a couple YouTube videos as like background building, but it didn't really add too much. Any thoughts, Derek, before we end it out?
Yeah, that's an incredible story actually. That was a lot more gripping than I expected it to be. Like I thought that like all of the romantic sort of things I knew about Bonnie and Clyde were going to be kind of undercut by their actual real life story, but no, that was like the fact that it was way more human than I was expecting was actually like made it more compelling to me. I really
I honestly think this is a far, like, from a personal point of view, this is a more compelling story, like the truth, because it, like, anytime you see a media adaptation, you know, well, what did they play up? What did they do? All that. It's obviously not real. And everything I know always plays up some part of it to proportions that honestly make it to the point where it's not even a realistic approach on this, you know? Any thoughts before we go, Derek?
yeah, put some respect on their name. Bonnie and Clyde.
It's a lot more complex story than I thought it was, for sure.
Oh yeah, hold on. We had a grand total of nine comparisons to like a modern day meth couple.
9 meth comparisons. Okay.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Great job. That was really good.
I think I've kind of like figured out this not really taking like getting my own script written, even if it's like still a learning curve for me. And obviously, I'm cutting lots of stuff. Do not take my interpretations of the story as like the full source. One, sometimes I'll misremember or misquote. So, like, I am not your gospel. People, do your own research. But like, I think it's a fun interpretation, and it's a fun way of explaining things to you. So, where can they find you on social media, Derek?
They can find me on Twitter at Visigoth. The first I is a 1, the O is a 0. They can find me on Blue Sky. The first I is just a regular I, the O is a 0. Tim, where can they find you and the podcast stuff?
So they can find me personally on both Blue Sky and Twitter at Tim, aka Otis. And they can find the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at the Alexandria Society Pod. And on Twitter and Instagram, not Twitter and Instagram, and on Twitter and Blue Sky at Alex Society Pod. And then on TikTok, where I will post outtakes and hopefully eventually get back to our beer reviews. Like, I am just as bad as Derek, but like, life got in the way. I'm sorry for keeping promising those reviews and not getting it to you. At Alexandria Society on TikTok. If you've enjoyed what you liked, please give us a rating and review on your streaming platform of choice, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.